Alright, hey folks, so I'm doing this as a little bonus video because it has been a while since I've done something going over all of my prep. All the stuff that I do in order to do a speedrun. So I have all of it here. I have everything prepared. Now, there are a few things in here that you'll be familiar with if you watched my runs before. There's some other stuff that you will probably have no idea what it is. One of the more interesting things, and I'm really curious if it will actually work this time, is these presents here. You might be thinking, why are these presents in my bags? You know, is this just cosmetic flavor, like I'm trying to keep it a surprise? This is a weird quirk of the PTR. And I'm going to start with this because I think it's the funniest. The way that certain items work when copied over to the PTR, which is where I do a lot of my speedruns, and if you're not sure why I do that, look at all of these things and just try and guess roughly how much a lot of this stuff costs. Obviously, heirlooms are free. I have enchants, which are one-time cost to apply, but a lot of these consumables, I'm not going to use every single one of the run. I'm not going to go through 100 flasks in a single run. They last 30 minutes. This section of the run is like 15 minutes. I'm going to use 1 out of 100 of these. But I have a stack of 100 left over from previous expansions, etc. But like the quest items, each of these is like 500 gold. A lot of these things were like 500. Some of them were a few thousand. And I'll go into detail on them, of course. You know, they're socketed BOEs. They can get a little bit pricey. The gems and stuff, they're rank 3 for War Within. These all have a cost attached to it. Now, I do a lot of test speedruns, and if I were to go through these items to test a speedrun every single time, the price tag would get ridiculously high. And one of the ways to combat this is by doing the runs of the PTR, because then you could just copy over a character on live. So I have this priest on live servers, and I have all this stuff in my bags, but I don't need to actually use it. Whenever I want to do a test run, I just copy over another version of this priest, and I'm good to go. All that to say, some items that are BOEs, when I copy them over, like you can see all of these things are bind on equip. For whatever reason, these aren't affected. The level 70 to 80 BOEs are. I don't know why they are, but when I try to copy them over to the PTR, they become soulbound. And my workaround, which somehow works, is if you wrap the BOEs in wrapping paper and turn them into a red ribboned gift, you can see that the gift becomes soulbound. But if I open the gift, the BOE is still in here, intact, in that it's bind on equip, but its durability gets reduced to 0. I don't know why this happens, but it happens consistently with all of my level 70 to 80 BOEs. So I have level 74 BOEs and level 76 BOEs. I mean, it works. They're BOE, I can now mail them, but if I don't put them in wrapping paper, they become soulbound and I'm unable to actually use them for the speedrun. So every time I copy over this character, I have to keep the BOEs in the gift and then repair them. And that works for some reason. I still don't understand why that's a thing. I wanted to touch upon that first just because that is one weird quirk specific to the PTR. But okay, so I have all this stuff here. Let's, where do I start? Let's start with the heirlooms, because the heirlooms are the main thing that I haven't gone over in the past, because for a while they were bugged and it has since been fixed. And now I guess I could talk about them. So for starters, helmet obviously has no enchants. As for which helmet you use, it really doesn't matter. I'm using one with haste because I'm playing a Windwalker monk for the run that I'm going to do, and Windwalkers really like haste. It's really that simple. The shoulders, you can get enchants from Missa Pandaria. They are, let me pull up, probably should have opened this before I started the video, but it's a third channel video. We're just doing it on the fly. Greater Tiger Fang, Tiger Claw, or Crane Wing Inscription is what you want to put on these. Now, the shoulder enchant is a bit weird because it requires you to be somewhere between like level 32 and 70, I want to say, to actually apply it. The harder thing is that you need to have a character within that range, so you can't just create like a level 10 and apply the enchant. You need to have somebody partially leveled. This applies to another enchant, namely the pants one. We'll touch upon that later. But some enchants like that are weird. There is a level requirement for actually applying it. So keep that in mind for this particular shoulder enchant. As for which one you use, again, it doesn't matter. That I won't touch upon that for every single one. The rings, too, is something I get asked a lot. Which ring should I run? Which stat combination? It's literally whatever you want, it doesn't really matter. If you want to min-max it, then whatever the stats are best for your class, which is going to depend. For a lot of classes, it's going to be crit or verse, because at lower levels, they scale really well. There are some exceptions, though, like Windwalker Monk. Windwalker Monk, even very early on, gets very good talents that scale with haste, so that is pretty good, too. But I would say, generally speaking, Mastery is the only one that you don't always want, but there is, like, 1 or 2 specs that scale really, really well with Mastery. It's hard to say. Again, you could literally run whatever. The secondaries aren't going to matter that much while leveling. If you really want to min-max it, you're going to need to look into that yourself for whatever class or spec you want. But like I said, crit or verse is generally a good all-rounder, because getting critical strikes on your spells at low levels will usually just one-shot a mob, so that's just pretty good. Now, trinkets. The best trinket combo is always going to be Unstable Elemental Confluence and the Warlord's Draenor trinkets, with some exceptions. So you probably don't have this if you haven't played for a while, because this trinket was available from WoD Mythic Dungeons. So if I go to all specs, there's Orb of Void Sight for casters on my priest, and then this one for agility, there's one for strength. Now I have all of them, so I'm obviously using them. If you do not have this, it really doesn't matter the other one you use. Swift Hand of Justice is perfectly fine. It's just some stats and gives you some healing. I would say if you are a caster, then going with Discerning Eye of the Beast is probably better, because generally main stat's going to be better than secondary while leveling, and this gives you mana. It doesn't really make a huge difference. I would recommend getting Unstable Elemental Confluence, though, because it's easy enough to pick up. These days, you can still get it. A lot of people are confused about that. I'll probably make a guide eventually when I have nothing else going on, because you can still do Dragon Isle stuff to get it, even after the pre-patch event ended. Minari Training Amulet, this is one that is hard to get because you have to go through all of these Legion quest lines to unlock it. But as always, it is 100% worth it if you really want to get into, like, speed leveling, per se. Some people don't want to do speed runs, but they just want to level their characters quickly. If you have the time, it's worth getting this thing. You're only going to upgrade this. There are other heirloom necklaces like these things that give you, like, heals, which, stat-wise, they're effectively the same. But the on-use effect from this is actually pretty good, and you will see use out of it no matter what you're playing, so the nice thing about this is because it's a necklace, you can just upgrade it once and use it on every single one of your characters. It's not like leather armor, where if you're leveling a cloth user, you can't use that. So any heirloom upgrades you spend on this are going to be very, very valuable. And I know that's a thing that a lot of people in the community are discussing right now. Is it worth it to upgrade heirlooms? I would say with the current cost, probably not, but some very specific ones like Minari Training Amulet maybe are the exception to the rule, because of their bonus effect, which is actually really good, and because they are useful no matter what you're playing. So, something to consider. Now, for the other heirlooms for Cloak, I'm using a... Oh, almost forgot. I'm running Mark of the Trained Soldier for the enchant. It used to be that Mark of the Hidden Satyr was what you ran. The scaling has completely bricked Mark of the Hidden Satyr. It does literally no damage. It hits for 1. I am not joking. It hits for 1 damage, which is nothing. Even at level 1 damage is not a lot. Most abilities are hitting for 40 or 50, and it does not scale. I don't know how Blizzard broke it, but they really broke it. The other neck enchants aren't good, but Mark of the Trained Soldier gives you, like, a flat amount of mastery, which is at least something. It's going to be completely insignificant the higher level you go, but at least early on it's going to give you some value compared to the other ones, so you could honestly use an unenchanted version and you wouldn't even notice the difference, but if you're going to put something on it, use Mark of the Trained Soldier. For Cloak Enchant, there is a primary stat enchant. Use that. Pretty simple. It gives a benefit to everybody. The other nice thing is you don't need to change the enchant depending on what you're playing, because this will just give you whatever your desired primary is. No matter what. If you are on a caster, it's going to give you intellect. If you're on an agility user, it's going to give you agility. You don't need to re-enchant it. Easy. Another one of those one-and-done heirlooms that you don't need to think about. I already kind of touched upon rings, but obviously you're going to want to use whatever the stat enchant is for whatever stat you're prioritizing. So here I have the haste heirloom rings, and then I have haste enchants on them. Specifically, this ring enchant is the Accord enchant. I forget what expansion that's from, but I looked through all of the different ones across different expansions, and I found that Accord is the one that gives the most amount of stats without having a level requirement. and that's something that's very important to note, is some enchants give you better bonuses, but will not activate until you reach a certain level, such as these ones. We'll touch upon that in a second. That's why, for the record, I have 2 sets of heirlooms. For chest, I have all stats. This is... I think there's multiple that give the exact same effect. It's like glorious stats, powerful stats. A lot of them have been scaled to just give +5. There is no difference. If it has +5, you can use it, whatever is cheapest. Weapon, elemental force at lower levels is still king. You'll also notice I have sockets on this. That's one of the advantages of Garrosh heirlooms. A lot of them can get bonus sockets. Gems are a very complicated subject that I'm only going to give a very brief rundown on. In fact, fuck it, I can do it here. Basically, as far as gems go, you want to focus on, at lower levels, speed gems. So this thing here, Straddling Viridium is really good at lower levels because the amount of speed you get for this is like really strong. And then you want gems that give you primary stats. So you can't get multiple of these. There's Leviathan's Eye of all the different stats. This gives 23 agility. At this level, this is very good. I think it gets scaled down a little bit, but proportionally, it is still a lot of primary stat for this level. And then there are 2 others, Kraken's Eye and Saber's Eye, that they all are unique with other Saber's Eyes, but you can have all 3 of these different gems on at once. And the primary stat is obviously going to be pretty good for you. I'll touch upon the enchants on these later. I'm just explaining this because, for instance, the enchants, or the sockets that I put in my heirloom, I can't just put the same ones as my BOE gear, so I'm explaining that this is what I would prioritize. I would do Straddling Viridium, then Leviathan's Eye, and then the other stuff. The reason why I don't have that in my heirloom is because for the purposes of this run, I already know that I have it in here, and you cannot have more than one of these. But if you are not going to be buying green items like I am for this run, then you would want to prioritize ones like this, and your heirloom would have Straddling Viridium and this. The reason why I have this stuff in my heirloom and not in that gear is because the exact gems that I use for these slots will change a little bit, and the value of these gems will vary. So the value of, for instance, 19 agility will kind of change as I get to higher levels. This one has slightly better scaling, so I'm going to be using this heirloom for longer, so I want the gems that have better scaling to be in there for longer. The gems are very confusing, and this is something that I just wouldn't worry about at all. If you're not trying to do super fancy speedruns, you can see, like, at higher levels, I also replace a primary stat gem for some additional speed, because the value of the primary stat, relatively speaking, falls off. But speed is still pretty good. So like in this one, it's very hard to find socketed BOEs around this level range. So I only have one of them, and the only one I use the speed, because the primary stat is worth a lot less when you have 85 of it on a piece of gear, etc. And then for the higher levels, you upgrade effectively to the Dragonflight gems. Finally, for these heirlooms, I have for pants, I believe it is, I have it listed here, Shadow Leather, Anger Hide, Shadow Leather or Angerhide leg armor. That's either strength or agility. And then for intellect, it is a different item called Powerful Ghostly Spell Thread, is what you want to put on your pants. I should note, by the way, I have a document that I am reading off for like some of the enchants, because it's hard for me to remember. I remember it's 8 agi and 4 crit. I don't remember the name of the enchant, but I do have that written down on my little Google Doc. A link to that will be in the description. And then I have a second set of heirlooms here that I'm going to switch to at level 61. This is super duper extra. I would not recommend doing this if you're just trying to level casually. You're going to get most of the value out of these heirlooms for your run. The only time you switch to these is at level 61. And I'm only going to be using these from level 61 to level 70 or so, which is like 15, 20 minutes, at least in the context of my run. It's not a lot of time. You get through it really fast. But the stat jump for these is really, really, really large, so it is good. The biggest one here is Frozen Devotion. As a weapon enchant, by this point, at level 61, Elemental Force will have fallen off considerably. It's just not doing that much damage at this point. It's not terrible, but Frozen Devotion does, like, it might be something like 50 times the damage. It's already a very good enchant when it comes to leveling scaling. For Dragonflight runs, I use this a lot. And for those 10 levels, this thing will sometimes just one-tap mobs if it procs. Basically, Frozen Devotion at level 61 works kind of the same way that Elemental Force works at level 1. At level 1, Elemental Force will proc and one-tap a mob. At level 61, Frozen Devotion will proc and one-tap a mob. So it's a really big upgrade because it can save you a considerable amount of time. And because I'm already using this and replacing my weapon and then upgrading the gems, it's kind of like I might as well go ahead and upgrade the rest because these enchants are starting to fall off in value at this point. So I upgrade, this is like +5 primary stat into 150 primary stat. This is 8 primary stat into 150 speed or something like that. Same deal here. 8 agility into 177 agility. Now, the relative gain that I'm getting from this is not that much because it's still a drop in the bucket compared to my overall stats at this point. But again, Frozen Devotion is so strong, I'm already replacing my weapon at this stage because in speedruns, it does save a little tiny bit of time. And the amount of additional time it takes me within the run to equip all of these other heirlooms is like 1 second. And I can do it while running, so I don't lose any time at all. So why not? Might as well. I would not recommend doing that for casual leveling. It's just, again, very extra. Don't waste your gold on this. What else? So that covers heirlooms pretty much. There's obviously slight variations that you can do for, depending on like what class you're playing. As for like what weapons are best invested in if you are trying to level up multiple classes, it's hard to say. Obviously, Garrosh heirlooms are the best, and for a while, I didn't use Garrosh heirlooms because very few people had them, but they became extremely easy to get during Mop Remix, and if you missed out on Mop Remix, that sucks, but also Blizzard has confirmed that it's coming back. So as long as something has recently been easily accessible to all players in the game, I'm fine using it in these speedruns, and especially knowing that it will return eventually, I feel comfortable enough using it and just saying like, hey, if you don't have it right now and you want to level characters, upgrade a different heirloom, or don't, just use a regular weapon. It doesn't really matter that much. Other stuff. I will touch upon real quick the things that everybody should know about. Darkman Fair items, not much to say here. These are used in like Darkman Fair. You can turn them in, you get a big chunk of experience. Relatively straightforward. You get the tickets here. You can buy them at the Darkman Fair itself, but during the run, of course, mailing them saves me a little bit of time, being able to land directly on the carousel. The Thermal Anvil is used for one of the quests in the Darkman Fair. I have a reagent bag that has all of these materials, many of which are used for crafting. So I have a list of all the stuff that I use for Dragonflight crafting, for War Within crafting, and for the Darkman Fair crafting quests. I won't go into super detail on that. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, again, the full list of what each material is for is on my shopping list. Bags, obviously, I'm using the biggest ones. You don't have to. This is something that a lot of people complain about, like, why would you spend a ton of gold on these bags for a run when other ones are cheap? And it's like, yeah, you can do that. If you want to spend 50 golds on a 32 slot bag compared to a 36 slot bag, which is like 2,000 gold, sure. Yeah, you're probably not going to need all 36 slots. The other thing, devil's advocate, though, is bags are always useful. It's not just a leveling thing. This is something that you will use your entire time playing the game. Inventory management is a pain in the ass, so if you just want to save yourself time and buy the bags now while leveling, you're still going to use these at max level. So if it's a character you know you're going to play, why not? That's kind of my mindset on it. Consumables, I will quickly run through here. The problem is there's a lot of other consumables that are like caster stuff, but Lemon Herb Fillet, you're always going to use. It activates the buff really quickly. It like only takes 2 seconds. You can get the well fed buff, so it's really good. Gives you a lot of healing if you need it, which usually you're not going to. For melee users, use Darkman Firewater. It gives you an attack power bonus. Drums of Fury, this is a mini lust. It's usable, I think, at level 10, I want to say you can start using it. Eventually, you're going to use Elixir of the Mongoose to replace Darkman Firewater. At level 30, you get War Scrolls. There is another one of these for Intellect, but I'm not playing a caster, so I don't need it for this particular run. Then Ghost Elixir, everybody uses. There are other elixirs around this level range. This is the level 31 that I use. But Ghost Elixir, despite giving Verse, which isn't amazing for everybody, the stats that you get from it, like the Verse it gives you, is considerably higher relative to the other stats from other elixirs you get around this point. It's just a weird scaling thing. It's been like this since Shadowlands, so Ghost Elixir just ends up being very good. There are potions that you can use at this level for different types. Agility is Potion of the Tol'vir. Let me scroll down on my thing and just read out which one it is. So it's Potion of the Tol'vir for Agi, Volcanic Potion for Casters, Intellect, and Golem Blood Potion for Strength. And then I should also note that at lower levels, casters will also be using Wizard Oil instead of some of this other stuff. And you will have flasks of Elixir of Greater Intellect instead of Darkmoon Firewater, and Elixir of Major Strength instead of Mongoose if you are Strength, obviously. This one gives you Agility, Elixir of Greater Strength, or Major Strength gives you Strength. A lot of the other ones are straightforward, right? So you get Augment Rune, Hyper. It's, what are the different types? Hyper, Focus, or Stout, depends on the primary stat for this Augment Rune. Then there is Greater Flask of the Currents, Fathoms, or Undertow. Greater Currents, Endless Fathoms, or Undertow for Agility, Strength, or Intellect. You don't really need potions these days, but I still send them anyway. Healing potions, that is. Damage is always going to be Unbridled Fury, no matter your primary stat. Bear Tartar is a food buff that gives you a speed boost whenever you kill an enemy. This is still very good. You're going to use it for most of the leveling process. Battle Scarred Augment Rune, this gives you all 3 stats, so you don't need to worry about it. This is level 50 for Augment Rune. And then Shadowlands, everybody uses the same thing. Shadow Core Oil you apply to your weapon. Spectral Flask gives you primary stat. Phantom Fire, it's kind of a similar thing as Unbridled Fury, where you just get bonus damage sometimes. And then Fried Bonefish is just a better version of Bear Tartar, where it gives you a speed boost after you kill something. Veiled Augment Rune, same deal. Better Augment Rune that gives you all stats. Dragonflight stuff. Shocking Disclosure gives you a pulsing damage effect around you. Not so great for casters, so you can use a primary stat boost one instead, Potion of Ultimate Power. But for any melee users, this is generally going to give you more damage if you're doing large pulls, which you should be. There's healing potions here, Refreshing Healing Pot. You don't need to use them, but I like to have them. Glacial Fury is by far, can't talk, the best flask to use. It's kind of like the Frozen Devotion enchant I mentioned earlier, where it'll just sometimes proc and delete a group of mobs. Both of these work together really well. Sometimes you'll one-shot mobs with Glacial Fury, you'll pull another pack, Frozen Devotion pops off, kills those mobs, and you just end up one-shotting like 5 mobs in a row because you're chaining these procs back to back. It's a really, really good effect to have. It's very powerful. Howling Rune is one of the... There's another person on the PTR. It's a Korean player. Okay. I, never see people on the PTR. I always thought I was the only one on here. All right, there's another Korean player here. I think that's Korean. Anyways, got distracted by that. It just feels so weird seeing somebody else actually on here. Normally, it's my own little private area. Oh, here, fun. Another fun little... It's technically preparation, so I'll show this little fun thing that I'm doing as part of this run. Let me turn off my game capture, then turn it back on, and I can show you what I'm talking about. So I have a second account also on the PTR, because as part of the run, you need to use Dream Surges. Now, this buff here, Dream Surge Learnings, gives you 30% increased experience in the Dream Surge zone. And this is key for maximizing the experience you get from War Within Enchanting. And when I do my 70 to 80 runs, I'm able to just start the run while this buff is active. So, really easy. You just make sure that this thing's up, you grab it, and you level your enchanting with the bonus in this zone, in this case, Onaran Plains. So I need to make sure that, if possible, middle of the run, because I'm starting at level 1 and I'm going to be getting to 70 later on, I'm doing my crafting with this bonus, but because I'm not starting at 70, I can't guarantee that this thing's going to be active when I actually get there within the run. So I have my alt account sitting here monitoring the buff, but what I'm actually going to do is vote against it now, because I want to make sure that the experience buff is never winning until it's going to win right around the time when I hit level 70. Maximize the chances for it to actually appear. In this case, it doesn't really matter, but let's say 1 hour into the run, the experience buff appears as an option. I want to make sure that I vote against it. That way, if an hour later I'm ready to do my crafting, the experience buff has a greater chance of appearing, because otherwise, if it was just active, it doesn't have a chance to appear on the next set of buffs. So this means that it's always available in the pool, and then when I know that I'm 30 minutes away from doing my crafting stuff, I can go ahead and vote for the experience one and do it. A little complicated there, but because I just saw that the experience buff popped up and it rotated to the next one, I figured, hey, this is the perfect time to explain that part, which this is about speedrun prep. That is technically a part of speedrun prep. It's kind of something I'm going to be monitoring in the middle of the speedrun as well, but I suppose it counts as prep because I did have to park my character there, so why not? I'll show it. Anyways, where was I? Kind of bouncing all over the place here. Yeah, so for runes, let me find this. I put it under, I think, the weapon oils section. Yes, buzzing rune, hissing rune, or howling rune. There's 3 different stats. It's either crit, haste, or mastery. There is no versatility rune. So whatever stat you want the most of, it's usually going to be haste or crit. You're going to get that respective rune to apply to your weapon. This will replace Shadow Core oil and stuff like that. This one is a little bit weird. Aerated File of Quick Hands. You're only going to use this for the crafting section, but during those crafting sections, it is actually quite nice because 30% increased crafting speed is pretty good. It actually saves a considerable amount of time. And then all the War Within stuff. So Algari healing potions, well, I've said before that a lot of these healing potions aren't really going to matter because a lot of the scaling on the Chromie time stuff doesn't really have a chance to kill you if you know what you're doing. These I would absolutely recommend doing because a lot of the delves have mobs that can fuck you up. And depending on what you're playing, it's really good to have an emergency heal because you cannot always rely on Bran, even if you have him spec'd as a healer. So definitely grab some of these if you plan on doing my leveling route because some of those guys are rough. Alchemical Chaos is the only really viable flask option for War Within. Unfortunately, there aren't any flasks like Glacial Fury, at least on the power level of it. I think there is like some proc damage flask, but it's really bad. It's just like not tuned well at all. Tempered Potion is the only real potion as well. It just gives you a bunch of secondary stats. Again, there's nothing kind of like Shocking Disclosure. Unfortunate. Reborn Cheetah, you're not going to use a lot because you get dazed if you are struck, so you can really only use this in situations where you're out of combat. You technically can use it in combat, but again, you have to be very careful about not getting dazed. So its use cases are limited, but I have every now and then found like 1 or 2 cases where I'm indoors, I need a speed boost, and this thing comes in handy. Usually in delves, but it can be quite helpful there. Ironclaw Whetstone, you can replace this with Algari Mana Oil if you are not a melee user, but for melee users, a lot of times this is going to be your best option. If you are using something that is not a sharp weapon, so like a mace, you can use a Weight Stone instead of the Whetstone. And then again, words. Algari Mana Oil works for everybody, and casters will definitely want to use that because it just gives you a set of stats instead of attack power. Augment Rune, again, it's just a better Augment Rune. This is one that I don't know if you even really need to use. This will replace Fried Bonefish, and while it does give you a flat speed benefit that is like a good bit higher than the speed you get from fried bonefish, this is only for 5 levels, so whether or not it's worth actually eating this is debatable, but hey, you might as well if you have it. The diving helmet, this is for underwater delves specifically. There are like very niche cases in the Alliance leveling route that you can sometimes use this, but I've mostly routed that out these days. So nowadays I'd only use this if you are specifically doing something like the Sinkhole or Takrathon Abyss, which I'm actually pretty sure that because of the delve variants they have on the day I'm attempting this run, I won't be doing either one of those because they're both crappy variants. Whatever. I'm going to mail it to myself anyways. We're just going to try it out. Who knows? Maybe I will end up doing them regardless. What else? Gun shoes, gliders, XA1000 surface skimmers. These are just very good movement items. Swiftness potion at lower levels. This is good for running around before you get like the damage potions. You want 1 of 2 mount equipments, either Comfortable Rider's Barding if you are not a tank, because this prevents you from getting dazed while mounted. Tanks have that as a default thing. They can never be dazed while mounted, so tanks will instead use Light Step Hoof Plates, gives you 10% additional movement speed. Draft of 10 lands. I will die on this hill. It is still worth getting this. 10% experience, which you can carry through to the later levels. You cannot use it beyond 49, but the last 20 levels of Chromie time are so fast, they're like 30 minutes. You can regularly not only have this rolling the entire last 20 levels of Chromie time, you can carry like 30 minutes of this over into 70 to 80 leveling. And right now, 70 to 80 leveling is like 1.5 hours if you're really optimizing it. So you can get a lot of value still out of Draft of 10 lands, despite what it seems. Absolutely, this thing is still worth using. It is not hard to farm at all. I've made guides on this a million times. You can find them on my website, on my channel. It's really easy to farm if you actually want to do the setup required. Setting up characters to farm this is the hardest thing. It's not even that hard. People are just lazy. But if you do that, it's like 5 minutes of work to get one of these potions. And if you really do a ton of setup, you can get it to the point where you do like 5 minutes work to get 5 potions. It's not hard to farm these at all. It really isn't. And 10% experience is a lot. It's a lot. Also, the stats at lower levels, they can help. So especially starting from level 1, I'm going to get a lot more value out of this than I normally do. This stuff, and I guess going along with this, so for... I actually don't want leatherworking. I didn't even think of that. I'm not even going to use... I need to use it. Okay, whatever. I'm going to do that after the... Crap. I'm going to have to do that after I stop recording and actually get the run set up, which I need to talk fast because I need to actually do the run that I'm saying I'm going to set up. I am on a clock here, unfortunately. But I'm going to be using blacksmithing for this particular run. There were a few runs where I was experimenting with leatherworking, and I've since dropped that idea just because it's slower for... is complicated routing reasons that I won't get into. The important thing here is that you want stuff with crafting speed. Again, this really doesn't matter that much. For non-speedruns, I wouldn't recommend this, but it can save off or shave off a little bit of time if you're really trying to min-max. So I'm going to be doing blacksmithing. I will get crafting speed blacksmithing accessories, which I will need to do because I forgot. Thank God I did this video, or I probably just would have forgotten that I still had the leatherworking tools prepped. And then same thing for enchanting with Khazal-Gar. I have crafting speed here. This is, I would say, more important because you actually craft a lot more for Khazal-Gar stuff than you do with Dragonflight stuff. And this will always be enchanting if you're following my guide, because enchanting is just very good for some specific reasons. This is part of the materials. You can't put this in the material bag, but it would effectively be grouped with all this stuff. It's used in recipes. What else? I think all that's left to talk about is my crafted gear. Well, not crafted gear, but BOE gear. So, I guess Radnax's control gem is in the corner over here. This is a staple for speedruns. You end up mailing all of this stuff over. You have to mail multiple to get the full value out of it. For all of this stuff, obviously the stats and what you're able to find kind of depends, but for gloves, I just have primary stat and chance for agility all the way down. For boots, I have minor speed all the way down. This gives you increased movement speed. And then I have Planesrunner's Breeze, which gives me flat speed and a slight speed boost. For belts, there's no enchants. There are belt buckles that you can do, but it binds the thing to you, so you can't do it before mailing, which kind of kills a lot of its usefulness. And then for bracers, same thing. I have flat primary stat enchants, and then I have a flat speed enchant because there's no really good primary stat enchant at the higher levels. Now, for these sockets, and in some cases, let me find the really good one that I got. I forget what level it is. This thing here, yeah. So, it is very weird, but it is possible to get random green items with both speed and a random socket on it as bonuses. This item could just drop with crit and mastery, or it could drop with crit, mastery, speed, and a socket. It's completely random, and you might find this in the auction house for like 50,000 gold, which, honestly, that's what this should have cost me, because how rare it is to find something like this, it's like astronomical. This is the only socketed speed and, only speed socketed BOE I managed to find. And I checked the auction houses for like 30 different servers just to find items. And this is, for the record, I've used these specific BOEs in multiple runs already, and that's the benefit of the PTR. I can find ludicrously rare BOEs like this, and because I'm doing my test runs of the PTR, I can use them in every single run over and over, so it's nice. But this particular item is so hard to find, and I think I picked it up for like 500 gold or something. Basically nothing, because if you go to like dead servers, there's going to be people who get this. They don't realize that they just got a lottery item. They'll throw it on the auction house, and if you just check some random dead server for BOEs in this level range, you might find this thing. And technically speaking, I could have a speed socketed item in every single slot for every single level range, but it's just so hard to find these things. Like I said, I checked 30 servers, and this is the best I could find. I found one item that had speed. Finding socketed BOEs in the level 13 range is so hard. I could not find any. And even here, it's still really hard at level 23. I managed to find it. It's a little bit easier. And the problem is, the exact levels that I picked are a little bit arbitrary. I picked it at specific breakpoints where the stats jump up like a lot compared to other levels. My exact logic would be way too hard to explain as to why I picked 23, 30, 41, 50, 61. The TLDR, like I said, is that it's a good stat breakpoint, and they are roughly equidistant in level to where I would be at that part of the run. Like, the amount of time it would take me to get from 13 to 23 is roughly the same as 23 to 30, give or take, which means that I'm getting gear upgrades from, you know, bot BOEs at like a consistent pace, so I'm never falling behind in power. There's a little bit more intricacy to it, but again, that would take me much longer to explain, and to 99.9% of you, it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that if you really want to min-max, you can find this stuff. But again, the only real reason that this is advantageous for me to do is because I can copy these over to the PTR and use them infinite times. So I can find a rare BOE and then use it a lot. If you're only using it once, I mean, you're sinking insane wealth's worth of VOEs into leveling one character marginally faster, because the time save you get from this is like barely anything. This really doesn't matter. I would not recommend buying any of these BOEs. They're good for speedrun, sure, because if you can do it, why not? It's just a nice bonus, lets you kill things easier. But for casual leveling, I would not recommend doing that. Same for this. These are even more expensive. Getting the level 74 and level 76 BOEs for War Within. This is just because since I am doing like a weirder leveling route that relies on like one-time delve completion, which generally is RNG and what loot it gives, you actually can get good loot from delves, but the weird thing about speedrunning is also it's faster to skip the delve rewards and leave the delve before looting the chest, because you still get credit. You don't get any bonus experience. But you lose like 15 seconds to get a piece of gear, which can actually be equivalent to these BOEs that I'm getting. So for casual players, this honestly isn't super necessary. You can get unlucky and like never upgrade your belt from the start. The only thing with War Within gearing is that a lot of the scaling is wacky. So gear will start off in the low 400s, and then by the end of the run, it'll be like in the mid 500s. But you get to like the low 500s already at level 74. You basically gain 100 item levels in the first 4 levels. And then 2 levels later, you're only getting like 20-ish item levels. And the amount that you gain every single level slows down. Like level 79 is only 540 something. So you don't really get that much more powerful beyond this point, which is why I have BOEs for this range, because it lets me skip the early, really crappy gear, but I'm not replacing it super often. Honestly, if you wanted to buy anything, get 74, just because that's like the first big power spike, and everything after that ends up being relatively trivial. I also still have my Defender's Armor kits in my bags, because if you try to apply it before mailing it, it will soulbind the item. The other enchants are not like that, so you can pre-enchant your weapon, Authority of the Depths, and the item will still be BOE. And that also applies to these items, and this is the only crafted or BOE item that, well, actually, they're all crafted, that I would recommend buying, because a lot of these are dirt cheap. Now, I've gone above and beyond, and I actually have embellishments on my stuff, and you can even add additional sockets, so you can get up to 2 sockets on your crafted necklace and rings, and then gem them with rank 3 gems. Now that is a little bit extra, and I would not recommend doing that. But buying these 528 items for neck, 2 rings, chest, boots, bracers, cloak, and helmet, and you need engineering for this helmet, but I would recommend getting engineering while leveling anyway, even if you don't want engineering at max level. Just train Kazilgar engineering, 1 skill point, it lets you equip this helmet, and it gives you access to this thing, the wormhole generator, which you only need one on your account. It's a toy, and you can use it infinite times, and it lets you fast travel to any zone of your choice. Really, really good. Always learn engineering while leveling, and then you can get this helmet too. And then you have these trinkets, which I don't know if this is intended or not, but this is supposed to be entry-level, level 80 gear, and it has a level 70 requirement. And it's been like this for months, and I've shown it in speedruns before, and Blizzard hasn't fixed it, so maybe it's intended. But while you're in war mode, you also get 10% primary stat and stamina, and you're ideally going to be leveling in war mode because you get more experience in it anyways, so this is really good. And you might be wondering, why am I using the maximum health, what's it called, trinket? Because you might be like, well, that's really crappy, but because of that set bonus, and the fact that it just has a lot of flat primary stat, it's still a good trinket. And you can actually get a lower item level version of this from Dragonflight. It's like 400 something item level, but the amount of stats that it has on it is considerably less on its proc than the flat value from this 558 one. So I would still say, based on my testing, this is a better combo, even though it might feel weird to use like a tank trinket. And these two trinkets, the PvP ones, can be a little tiny bit pricier, like a few thousand gold, compared to these ones, which are like a few hundred gold each. And I cannot understate or overstate the value of getting these BOEs for leveling every single one of your characters. You can equip this at level 71, and having a 528 item level piece at 71 is huge, because the average item level that mobs will be scaled to around this point is like low 400s. So you're going to effectively have like 100 more item levels than you should on multiple slots. And these items are really, really, really cheap. And having that massive power spike, it will make your leveling faster, but it will just also make your leveling easier and more fun, because you don't need to deal with the bullshit of mobs just doing way too much damage. Highly, highly recommend this. Whew. I think I did everything. The only last thing I'll touch upon is, if you're gonna use gems, get the movement speed primary, and then get like one of each color, or at least if you're not gonna add sockets, just get like 2 unique colors for these. I obviously have one of each color here that I'm going to apply, because if you do add this thing, it will soulbind that. So I have to do that on the character. You can see there, it'll do that. But yeah, that covers everything. Now, again, there might be like 1 or 2 items for non-agility that I didn't mention in this video. It's all in my shopping list. And I also, generally speaking, in the runs where I play casters, will discuss what I'm using and why. So you can watch one of those if you really want to level like a warlock. I'll probably do a warlock run soon, because a lot of people have been asking for it. But with that said, I have about 2.5 hours until the Darkwind Fair ends, and I have to do a run that has an estimated time of 4 hours, which is gonna be fun how I managed to finagle that one. And I just realized I need to replace these 2 items with the blacksmithing version, so fun! I'm gonna go do that, and hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you're curious to see what the end result of all of this prep is, go check out the actual run, which I hope will go as well as I think it can. I'm going to do that shortly, and a link to that will be in the description whenever I finish that. I'm probably going to post this prep video before I post the actual run itself, because the run itself will probably require more editing. This one I can just chuck up there and we're good to go. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Peace.